Life in general is often stressful, regardless of what's going on at work. One of the strategies that some utilize to deal with life's challenges is their love and appreciation for art. We'll talk with a former therapist, nonprofit board chair, and art enthusiast about the therapeutic value of art on this episode of the Psych Health and Safety USA podcast. From Flourish DX, this is the Psych Health and Safety USA podcast. As workplace mental health has become a global priority, there's a greater focus on addressing psychosocial hazards. Each episode, we look at psychological safety from an occupational health and safety perspective. Let's talk Psych Health and Safety. Welcome to this week's Psych Health and Safety USA podcast. I'm your host, Dr. I. David Daniels, and I want to thank you for tuning in. Each week, we seek to increase awareness of the importance of psychological health and safety by learning from the lived experiences, research, and expertise of our guests, as well as advocating strategies to reduce harm and minimize vulnerability to psychosocial hazards in the American workplace. So we're continuing our series of conversations about responses to exposure to psychosocial hazards. As much as I'd love to have a wonderful, perfect world where no one ever got exposed to things that made them feel bad, that's just not the real world. And so we've been talking over the last couple episodes about strategies that folks use when they are exposed. How do you deal? Because people still have jobs they want and need to do. They still have relationships they want to maintain. And so sometimes it's just necessary to find a way to get through what's going on in life. And today's a very interesting topic. So the therapeutic potential of art is vast and applicable to individuals in all groups. As a matter of fact, art therapy's been around since the 40s, and it allows clients to express their inner thoughts, feelings, and experiences creatively. So a literature review on art therapy will reveal that therapists frequently assigned their patients freeform art expression to help discussions about the images and encourage introspection. When combined with talk therapy, art therapy aids individuals in managing intense emotions, fostering self-awareness and self-worth, decreasing stress and anxiety. The therapeutic approach encompasses various creative expressions, including dance, music, drawing, painting, coloring, sculpting, and more. So again, this episode is not specifically about art therapy, but it's about the value of the arts and culture as a strategy to help cope with life's challenges. So let's start with an introduction from our guest with this question. Who is Deb Griffin?
Thank you, David, for that. And I am a retired mental health professional. Retired meaning that I just don't get paid anymore. I still enjoy working and pursuing things I'm passionate about, which is mental health and art. And I'm a lifelong learner, so it keeps me learning and things like this keep me engaged in learning about the value of art. I specifically chose to be trained as a licensed clinical social worker because social work values the person in their environment. It's not just about what's going on in your head or what's going on in your brain or, how do you feel about your mother? But it's more a situation where if a person's having a hard time, it's going to affect all areas of their lives. And so you need to explore that with them. So I'm still a clinical social worker. I will be all my life. I just don't get paid for it anymore. But I'm fascinated with people and fascinated with how all of that pertains to people's work environment as well.
Sure. So when you hear psychological health and safety, what pops to mind when you hear that?
Well, you know that I have a tremendous interest in the systemic issues that we have in this country, and I think that we've waited a long time to start worrying about psychological health in workspaces. We've done a fairly good job with physical safety, but it's only recently, and I'm honored to know you and to know the work you've done in this area. It's only recently that people really think about the psychological safety. And, I could do another whole podcast on needing evidence when it comes to arts and mental health, but we have evidence. We have evidence that people that are happier at work are more productive. We have, that they have less missed days, they have less addiction. So, our work environment's really, really important to productivity. I personally don't think we should live in a world where everything has to be productive, but,
Right.
some people do.
Right.
And so I can talk that language as well. But
Right.
there's a lot of evidence based. There's a really interesting science now called neuroaesthetics, and it has to do with studying art and mental health and really sorting out how does that all happen biologically and neurologically. And they're developing evidence because now we can map the brain and map emotions and all of those things. So we have the ability to really come up with some evidence for people that need it.
Right.
There's another whole interesting piece to me about this from a psychological safety standpoint in the workplace is not just that if somebody gets in trouble, they could use art therapy. I have a certificate in art therapy as well as my licensing, and therapeutically, it is everything you said. It can be so valuable in opening up the parts of our psyche that we might not be in touch with, or that may be damaged or had been painful for some reasons and we don't have language for. But this neuroaesthetics is also looking at having art in the workplace and how that contributes to people's psychological well-being and safety. Because if we assume that people suffer the most around places where they don't feel safe,
Right.
then they've proven that art in workplaces does make us feel safer. It does make us feel more creative. It makes us feel more innovative. And not just things that you've bought that have been mass produced, like a beautiful leaf or a pond or something like that, but artwork that really represents people's lives. One of the things we know is that before time was measured, human beings picked up charcoal or rocks and scratched their lived experience into walls that we found. We know that it mattered to them. They wanted other people to know what their life was like. And they wanted to record their experiences. So in putting art in the workplace now, if it reflects people's, and it can be many people's lived experiences. For a long time, art reflected wealthy people because they were the ones that could pay to have artists do it. And that's not the case anymore. We value folk art. We value art that's coming out, spoken word poetry, and all of the things that can come out of our communities and our environments. So there's a lot of ways that you could have people's experiences, their, artist representations of their lived experiences outside the office that would make them feel psychologically more comfortable to be there. You're never going to stop. Art's not going to stop people from making boneheaded mistakes about how they talk to each other. That just happens because we're human beings.
That's right.
But if you and I are in a workplace and I say something offensive to you or you say something offensive to me, if we're comfortable, but this space reflects both of us equally, then I'm more apt to come to you and say, you know what, David, I'm sure you didn't mean this, but you said something and I want to talk about it.
Right.
But, the workplace, so that's, to me, that's the psychological safety piece that art can provide. And that's a little more obscure than the way most people think of art, but it's It's true. It's true.
Yes. That's wow. Oh, okay.
That's a
Um,
lot. Sorry.
I that's no that is just such a fascinating way to make the connection between the two. What I said, really about the podcast and the topic in general, is I haven't found a place or a lack of connection to everything.
Mhm.
There's because the ways that we think about first about ourselves and we think about others are influenced by our environment. They are, and to your point is if the space can feel safer to me when the art in the space reflects me or I connect to it, I feel something about it, as opposed to we've got lots and lots of examples. Some come to mind from my fire rescue days back in the day when you go into a fire station and all of the art portrayed was all scantily clad women. So how does that make a woman feel? Seriously, that's one of the conversations years ago we had to have about
Yeah.
making
Yeah.
the environment safer for women because they didn't want, and some men. So some of us as men don't want to come in and see. I'm just saying, I don't want to necessarily see some scantily clad. I have a wife
Hmm.
and daughters and a mom, and I don't really want to see that either. So, to your point about how that really influences how people feel in the workplace, it's wow,
Hmm.
that's very important. It's really very important. Yeah. I wanted to dig just to pull another thread just for a second though. Is how so? How did you end up
Hmm.
being interested in becoming a therapist? Where did that? I mean, was that when you were a kid, you wanted to be one?
I'm the 5-year-old child that would have been sitting in a high chair at the table when we went out to eat with my mother tapping me on the shoulder and saying, quit
Really?
staring at those people, quit looking at those people. I was trying to hear what the other families were saying. I wanted to know what other
Really?
people's experience was like. I just was curious about other people. And then when I realized that through social, studying psychiatric social work, that you could also connect that to how they lived, and it I couldn't believe that I could get
Right,
paid to do
right,
that. I mean, frankly,
right,
I've been doing it for my family for years, and I
right.
thought somebody's going to pay
Yeah.
me to do this. This is amazing. So, and safety, is one of the most important
Say more.
pieces of
Say
mental
more about that.
health. You see people. Well, you see people on the street, and I've had this conversation with a lot of people. People see people living on the street, and they're talking to themselves, and they're angry, or they're
Right.
asking for money, or they're doing,
Sure.
whatever they have to do to get through the night. And they say, wow, you just can't, there's just nothing you can do about that. It's a mental health issue. And I always say, it might be. It might be they just need a safe place to spend the night. It might be they
Right.
just need a refrigerator with some food in it. How do you know it's a mental health issue when how many of us would not appear to be mentally stressed or deranged
Mm.
if we had to sleep on the street and we weren't safe? So safety to me is the core of all mental health, unless you have a biological issue that can be fixed. I mean, some people are depressed because of their, biological makeup. Some people can get schizophrenia because of their biological. None of it's
Absolutely.
made better by being unsafe.
Wow. That's also I intuitively it makes sense, but I haven't heard anyone put it that way. But such a great point. So much discussion and conversation right now about quote unquote workplace mental health, and a lot of the folks who are in this space
Mhm.
talking about psychological safety, psychological health and safety, psychosocial hazard mitigation. Most of them I've found to be mental health professionals and have great understanding of that piece, but not as many can really make the connection. It is a safety thing. And it's something that really, at the core, if you look at Maslow's
At the
hierarchy,
core.
past breathing, eating, and sleeping, if you don't have the safety piece, the rest of it doesn't matter. And I think sometimes we skip over that level of the hierarchy and we try to go to, well, let's see if we can get the person to express their feelings and self-actualize. They don't feel safe doing it. So it doesn't work. I mean, just like you can't get people to engage at work, I don't feel safe doing that. I don't feel safe really being myself in this environment or really doing what I do in this environment? Because all the clues, all the messages around me say that it's not safe here. So I don't feel it. I really don't feel it. Wow. Wow. That's right.
And that you're not welcomed. You're not really
Right.
welcome because we haven't taken the time to make the space be
That's
reflective of your lived experience, whether it's your cultural experience, your
right.
gender
Right.
experience,
Absolutely.
or whatever.
So, oh boy. Uh, so I think I heard you mention something about this earlier, but I want to assume though that in your opportunities to sit in, sessions with folks for therapy purposes, that often it was because something had already happened. The person had demonstrated a behavior, had expressed some concern. I don't feel good. It seems to be that we don't think about therapeutics until after something happens. Am I imagining that, or has that been your experience as well?
No, that's true. I
It
think
is.
that life's hard. So, you can have children that are struggling, or you can have marriages that are difficult, or people just experience the world in a different way. So there's always going to be individual reasons for people to turn up. But I've sat through many sessions with people who would talk about not feeling safe at work. They didn't feel like they had a boss that they related to, that would understand their needs or their and I'm not saying, it's like I always told my children, work is where you go and get paid. It's not supposed to be fun necessarily. I mean, you don't have to like it. It's not, you should like it. You should
Right.
enjoy what you do, but it's work. So I don't think that you need to turn work into a therapeutic experience necessarily, but I think that we could pay a lot more attention. I think systemically, work has been created to accommodate
Right.
a certain person. And quite often,
Right.
when we look in the mirror, it's not us. And so if you really care about that, rather than putting pool tables or, all the things that people do to make people feel comfortable at work in the new kind of .com whatever world, I think there's a lot of easier things we could do. I think there's a lot of things that we could do. And I think art plays a big part of that. One of the reasons I got involved in art was because I enjoyed art. I'm not artistic, but I love art just about in any form. And I am fascinated by hearing artists talk about their process, because I sat all day and talked to people who couldn't sort through the muddle that their life was. And then to spend my free time by being an arts advocate, spending my free time around artists who were making their lives beautiful and satisfying by expressing themselves through art. It was always an interesting juxtaposition to me, and something that helped me be better at helping artists and better at helping my clients as well, because there was such a connection. How do we, the big question in mental health is, how do you express yourself in a way that other people can hear you? Do you feel safe enough to express yourself that way? If not, could we find another way? Or do you need a different workplace,
Right.
or a different family, or what? It's always about how we can convey what our experience is. And artists do an amazing job of doing that.
Wow. I when I sit and listen to just guests in general, and certainly what you're saying, it sometimes is difficult to focus on the I need to ask another question piece, because you have it's such an interesting point that artists are able to express themselves in these unique kinds of ways. Another thing I heard you say is that you're interested in art, but you don't consider yourself to be artistic, which is also very interesting, because the vast majority of people that I can think of, the reason they're interested is because they are musicians, sculptors, painters, dancers, whatever. So they're therefore interested in other arts. But yours seems to come from this, back to sitting in the high chair, this interest in people. That's also unique. That's, that's just very unique.
Well, I would say that the arts needs consumers. And so I consider myself a consumer, and that's a valuable piece of the puzzle. I have an artistic eye. I mean, I can appreciate color and form and all of that kind of thing. So, I mean, I don't consider myself an artist. I mean, I'm not, if I sat down to do something like that, I would be, because I've thought a lot about it. I wouldn't really know where to start, to the extent that I care about that. I do it.
Sure.
Through my life. I mean, just maybe the way I keep my house, the way I do my, the way I am with my family.
Yes.
I think people can be artistic with words. I guess if I was artistic at all, it would be, being able to express myself. But
I just really think that's, again, just something that is, at least in my experience, fairly unique. And again, going back to the fact that it seems to be centered on your interest in people, and I, that's something that I believe is sometimes missing in all of our social interactions, as we are engaged in the interaction for the interaction's sake, not for people's sake. Sometimes, so I go to work. I mean, and the way you describe that work doesn't always have to be fun, and generally isn't. But I do find it interesting that becomes the norm. And when we have the opportunities to make it fun, we don't. Is that doesn't go, we don't care how you feel at work. We just care that the work gets done. And I'm not sure that's as effective, particularly as the Gen Zers and as the Gen Alphas come into the workplace. I think they need some of it to be fun. They really, this robotic, you will come and report at 8 and we'll leave at 5 and we'll get an hour break. That whole industrial revolution kind of approach doesn't seem to be working for folks. That they're looking for something more. They're looking for something that, again, that feels different, because so much of our work, as we transition out of this, again, industrialized type of economy, more into a learning, information kind of economy. It is really more about, about people, about human beings, about interactions, about services, and not necessarily about making things, because we can get a machine to make the thing and the machine doesn't care, but the people do. The people do. And I just think that, people care about that type of thing.
Absolutely.
And so have you had specific discussions, with groups about getting art into workplaces in general?
Not into workplaces necessarily. Okay. I want to say one thing about that, your last comment, before we move into that, but because I have things to say about that. But from a psychological standpoint, doing something for money is pretty soul killing. And we've never been told that. I mean, we've never been allowed to say that out loud or think about it, because money was everything. But I think we're coming into some generations now where I'll just live on less. I don't want to do that. And I think it's because they realize that it's soul killing. Now, it doesn't have to be. I think if your workplace reflected more of your lived experience and people were more welcoming of diversity and interested in other people's, lives and experiences, it wouldn't have to be that way. But I agree with you. We are in a period of change.
I do too.
And I think that's a good thing, because I believe that we'll be more productive that way, and certainly we'll be more innovative and creative that way. Nobody that's working for the next dollar is going to be very creative.
That's right.
They're trying to get it done as fast as they can. So We, we find, when I say we, I, and I will tell the audience that I chair the board for the South Fulton Institute. And we believe that there's place for everybody's art in everybody's lives, and that people are creating art all the time. And not unlike the Enlightenment era,
Right.
A lot of that money goes to the wealthy and the art that they deem to be appropriate or worthy or whatever. So we established the South Fulton Institute, was established in 2005. And we work to get art in the schools, to support individual artists in South Fulton County, which, for those that don't know, Fulton County is the county that encompasses Atlanta and all the surrounding suburbs. And the development has always been towards the north. The money has always been towards the north. And I would say some of the cultural richness develops in the South, but that's not been funded. So we don't hand out money. We partner with people and ask them what they need, what they want. And we are putting art in schools and helping support art in schools. So here's a safety story for you. So we had a school that was there was a program in the school by the big ballet company in Atlanta that is funded, and they had been for 20 years, they've been doing a program in the school in a classroom. Typical classroom, concrete block, concrete floor with asphalt tile on it. And so they came to us and said, we want some help. And we said, well, what do you need? And they said, well, we just, the kids, every child takes one of these dance classes, and it gives them some of these children live in really difficult situations. It gives them a chance to play and have fun and dance and use their bodies in really productive, artistic ways. And we said, well, does anybody ever get hurt on this floor? And they said, well, no, not yet, but it's, we've had some kids fall. So we talked with them and jointly kind of came up with the idea that we were going to put a sprung floor, which is what professional dancers dance on, so that you don't get hurt. That if you leap up in the air and come down on it, you don't crack an ankle or strain a foot or whatever. And so we put a sprung floor. We thought these kids decide that they deserve the same thing that you would get if you were in, practicing for the Atlanta Ballet. So that's the kind of things that we do, trying to give children artistic experiences. Some of them will grow up to be lawyers or firefighters or nurses or whatever they choose to be. But if they learn through the arts to be aware of their lived experience and talk about it and act it out in a positive way, then we think you have better citizens, you have better workers, you have better communities. So we mainly go to companies that have beautiful artwork in their lobbies and ask them to give us money so that we can help put it in schools and put it in communities and promote the arts. We have some wonderful, in South Fulton, we have wonderful filmmakers. We have wonderful spoken word poets. A lot of times they just need some help knowing how to interact with the system. To get what they need, a space, to file for a nonprofit status. A lot of people that have more money than that just go and hire a lawyer. But we deal with a lot of people that really can't afford to hire a lawyer. They're working and putting every dime they can come up with in their art. So we try to fill that gap. And so making that connection has been wonderful for me. It's kind of like, again, you just wonder, how did I get to do this?
Hi listeners, Jason here. We hope you're enjoying this latest podcast episode. Now, if you're like Joelle, Alicia and myself and enjoy learning from the best, then the Flourish DX Academy is for you. The Academy includes free e-learning courses on the ISO 45003 standard for psychological health and safety at work, and associated topics such as how to conduct a psychosocial risk assessment and how to create the business case for psych health and safety. All courses feature high-quality videos, downloadable resources, multi-choice questions, and a downloadable training certificate on completion. Take your learning to the next level with all Flourish DX Academy courses included within the Flourish DX mobile app. Select podcast episodes from the Psych Health and Safety podcast and sister podcasts from Canada and the USA are also included. Get started with Flourish DX for free at www.flourishdx.com/get-started. That's www.flourishdx.com/get-started. Now back to this episode.
Yes. Well, you've also caused me to think in the moment that so again, psychological health and safety is for everyone, everywhere, all the time, even in circumstances where they're not quote unquote being paid. They can still be emotionally or physically injured if we don't pay attention to the environment that they're doing whatever they're doing in. And it's just a great example about this the situation you observed and dived in to try to help these kids be safer, because often we don't find out about safety at home. Really, it's not unless you live with somebody who does that kind of stuff, but you find out about safety generally in the environment and generally at work, maybe at school. I don't think there's as much conversation as I'd like to see about safety in schools, other than safety relative to crime. We as a society decided that the only safety issue we're concerned about is, somebody might show up with a gun, and the likelihood of, faculty, students, parents, whoever in a school being injured is a lot more likely they're going to slip on the floor. We have to be concerned about those other things, but we just so much focus there, not enough. But the point I wanted to get to is it makes me think that the work that you're doing, both personally and through the Institute, is creating a safe space for artists themselves. So a place that they can, engage in this this sense of expression through their art, but do that in a safe way, because I'm going to guess, and I don't know this to be true, but I'm going to guess that not every space is safe for artists to be able to do the thing that they do. So, you have some folks who, and I know I've seen some of the film shorts of folks their art is actually on buildings, and that's not safe everywhere for people to do. People are being arrested and accosted and all types of things for simply expressing themselves in art in one community. And then in another community, perhaps they'll get a big philanthropic gift and be able to go out and do their thing. So talk a little bit about, creating safe space for artists and how important that is.
The arts are notoriously underfunded. If you get below that first tier of arts, I call them approved arts, the symphony, the ballet, and that anytime is going to cause safety issues. Anytime anything's underfunded. Companies that are underfunded have the worst safety records. Schools that are underfunded have the worst safety records. So go back to the school. So my guess is this is an elementary school, but they probably had a little football team. I'm sure the students had football helmets, because when you think about the system that we grow up in, and I don't mean that as a 4-letter word. We do grow up in a system. We just do. We have to look at it. The system would tell you, we have to protect our children when they're playing football, because that's socially acceptable place. You want your boys to be playing these contact sports, but never once think that every child in the school is dancing at least one day a week. And we're not worried about the dancers. If they hurt themselves, they hurt themselves. So in general, I can't tell you the number of playhouses in Atlanta that struggle to build their sets in a safe way, to have what they need for fire safety in their little spaces they're crammed into. I mean, the arts are terribly underfunded, and you're always going to have safety issues. And that is one of the things we address. We go in and say, no, this really isn't a safe place for you. Let's find you a space where you can have the room you need and the ventilation you need for the painting that you're doing, or, whatever it might be. Or they come to us more often than not and say, I don't have a space. This is what I want to do, but I don't have a space to do it in. And we help them find a safe space. We would never, that would never be a monetary decision for us. That would be a safety decision for us.
Yes.
Because we think everybody deserves that, even the arts. And they don't get it.
Right. Yeah, I can recall, again, I'm having not necessarily a flashback, but just thinking about in my time as a fire inspector, going into these small galleries and places that people would do art, and then not having proper ventilation systems to do painting, and not having, I really, because I'm not a dancer, I didn't really think about the floors and the types of situations that come up there. But, there are all of these safety related concerns that get skipped over. As long as we can get the person's, as whoever is sponsoring can get the person's talent, they sometimes don't necessarily think about the human being who houses the talent. So look, they can go in this room and they don't even have a respirator, but they can go in there and paint now. 10 years from now, or maybe even 5 years from now, they're going to probably have some type of respiratory ailment because they didn't do that properly, but that's okay. As long as someone made generally money off of them, folks don't seem to be as concerned about that. And that mindset exists in a lot of our workplaces, where we're really more interested in what the person produces, back to that whole productivity thing, and not about the human being themselves. Absolutely. Everyone's been turned into a product. And what about the human being? That is, and to me, that seems short-sighted, because if they're producing great things now, why wouldn't we want them to produce years and years and years? Now again, a little bit of disclosure. I've hung out with Deb and the Institute and some of the events and such, and recall seeing this gentleman that he was in his late 70s or so and had been doing art for years and was a professional athlete. And I had no idea. Have no idea that he was engaged in these kind of things. But this is something that you can start as a child and can take into your 70s, 80s, and 90s and continue to do it. Not like competitive sports, the other kinds of art that are more acceptable. It's things you can do and express yourself and still be safe doing it if you have a safe space. Wow.
Yes, and I think in some ways make you a better citizen. I always think about these. We have an impact statement we decided this year, rather than doing what the arts have always kind of followed corporate model and put out a year-end statement, that shows what they spent and what they did and what they accomplished and all that kind of stuff. And we decided to do a video instead. And there's a teacher on there that happens to teach at the school where the floor was put in. And he talks about instilling promise in these students that have trouble knowing what's available in the world. And I'd like to think that, out of all of those students that dance on that floor, one day somebody's going to walk into a job and say, this is not safe. I need for us to get this fixed. Because if we start with our students and we start with children and we let them know that the value of that child to us is that we will spend the money for them to have a professional floor to dance on, it goes back to what you value. It's how you express your values. And I think and we know, because we're beginning to hear companies that express different values, not just the bottom line dollar, people want to go to work there. There's the word's out. Who cares about the quality of life for their people? We can teach that in school by the way that we treat students. We can help our artists, but so the art, you said something that really triggered a thought in my mind that I think I've just not put together before. So back in the 80s, probably 70s and 80s, there was a form of art that was, it was plastics, but you could spray paint it and form it and all this stuff. And there was a lot of paint, a lot of acrylic stuff involved. And you made, most people made statues out of it or art pieces that people had in their homes. And they were expensive. And most of those people are dead. Most of the people that made it died of the lung disease because it was before they started having to wear, equipment. And they didn't know how.
Oh, sure.
My guess is the art still held its value. Whoever invested in it has a more valuable piece at the expense of someone's life.
Yes.
And I just this is the system we need to look at. What does that say about our values?
Unfortunately, there is more value placed on things than human beings too often. And again, there's a part of me that says, and I say things like that, and I'm sure I probably come across to some as, not being capitalist enough, and I'm okay with that. I'm okay with that because I honestly believe that, again, the creativity of a human being is much more important than what it is that they create, because they'll create something new. I mean, the thing that goes out of style is going to be replaced by something that will be in style. That all came from a human being. And to the extent we can create these environments where people can feel safe enough to express himself, feel safe enough to create, then I think that's just going to be beneficial for everybody. It just seems like it would be, because it's, it becomes this fountain of creativity. And that just seems to be such a much nicer place than some of these sterile, bring you in, work you to death, get something out of you for the next year, 2 or 5, and then cast you aside and look for the next person to try to exploit.
And I would argue that for somebody that thinks they're more capitalist than you and I are, I would argue that
exactly
it's not a zero-sum game. You can have both. You can have both.
Right.
And you can have better whatever you're producing. Your widget will benefit from you taking care of the environment and the people that are making it. And I think that, I hope that we're moving into a society where people will be more inclined to choose to buy that widget over another widget that was made the old-fashioned way, because they care about how people are treated. And, you have to be safer in company A. You have to be safer there psychologically, because they've already told you up front that they care about you as a person. And in the end, from a psychological standpoint, that's what most people's safety depends on, is knowing that people care about them, that somebody cares.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
And their safety matters to people. So I don't see that as being a dichotomy at all. And I don't see as it being one thing costing the other. I think the arts and the safety and the caring about human beings benefits our work and our work environment.
They definitely do. I wanted to make sure that I covered a particular topic before we conclude so share a little bit about at least your thoughts about how the arts can basically build bridges between groups of people and connect people, because in the workplace, so there's these 3 categories of psychosocial hazards. There's how your work is organized, there's the environment, then there's the people that you interact with that can create stress for you, because the conflict that goes on and the in group and the out group, that type of thing. And so can you share a little bit about at least your thoughts? Can art help bridge some of those divides?
Absolutely. I think in a workplace, once again, having a variety of art in a workplace where people could have conversations about I don't really understand this. And let me tell you about that. I just in looking at your website saw that your logo was developed in an artistic way to make a statement about what you value. And I was so fascinated with that. I thought that just makes me all the happier that I'm doing this today, because that's thoughtful, so it connected. I've been connected to you for a long time. I've known you for a long time, but it made me feel more connected. So in a place where people are free to, let's suppose that I had a necklace that was that logo and I was wearing it and somebody asked me about it because I felt comfortable wearing it. I felt comfortable that it was okay. And I went into the explanation of what it stood for. There's just 1,000 little ways that matters. There's also, I think there's also ways that companies, especially companies, are spending a lot of money now on DEI training.
Yes.
And you and I've had this conversation. Some of it's really good. Some of it's just boilerplate stuff that people sit through it because they have to. So one of the things we've done at South Fulton Institute is we have a section called Courageous Conversations. And this, we've had play readings that will be really complex, sometimes racial issues, gender issues, safety issues, all kind of things. And then at the end, so they read the play and you listen to it. And then at the end, we have open conversations about that. So I think you went to American Son. That's one of my favorite plays because it's so rich. What if you did that as a DEI training in your business? What kind of, I haven't sat through a DEI training because I worked for myself, but you tell me, would that be better than a DEI training that you've sat through?
Yeah, it probably would, because a lot of what's out there now is box checking, and reminding each other that, there are black people and white people and rich people and poor people and gay people and straight people and all of these, that type of thing. More of the, kind of sterile, we have to do this because if we don't, somebody's going to yell at us stuff. Yeah. As opposed to what is it that we can talk about between the two of us and learn something about each other and learn something about each other's lived experience and, be curious about other people. And it'd be much better. It would. Yeah. It would.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because you would
learn
I hadn't
something.
Thought
about that's right. That's right. And particularly and recalling some of those where the conversation, often to me, that's the most powerful piece about it. It's like watching a movie and then having a conversation, or watching a whatever, but being in the room to have people, do this artistic presentation, and then talk about it amongst, with other people in the room is very powerful. It is.
And we always hire facilitators. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. And you find that not only does the conversation start in the room, but it continues. And it continues. It'll go back to their neighborhoods, to their workplaces, to their schools, to their wherever. That was the spark that got the conversation started. But it continues because it is so powerful. And you want to talk more, want to have more conversation. Yeah.
So when you asked me about putting art in businesses, my dream is to put that in businesses. My dream in my next life would be to put those kind of conversations in corporations and businesses. Give me your lunch hour next week. I've got some people that are going to read a play and we're going to sit and talk about it. We'll have a facilitator. And I would be willing to bet you good money that it would be more impactful and strike more in the way of bridging the gap between people than anybody that ever came in and told you that there were Hispanics and blacks and gays, as if we didn't already know that.
Exactly. Well, so you're opening up a can of something that we probably don't have time to get into. So what if there are folks who are watching or listening and they're interested in this and they want to follow up with you, with the Institute? What's the best way to do that?
So the South Fulton Institute, it's southfultoninstitute.org is the website. They can see the work that we do. They can reach out to our executive director, Jennifer Bauer-Lyons. And they're welcome to reach out to me. And you can post my connection if you want to, my email address. I have, more passion than I have time or years left, but I'd love to talk to somebody that would be interested in doing something about, or with this, or just have a conversation. We're not without, we know how to do this. We know why it doesn't get done, but we know how to do it. There's no need for us to act like we don't. We know how to do this. And it's just a matter of what you value,
Absolutely.
I've always said, You show me your budget and I'll tell you what you care about. You don't have to tell me what you care about, because all I need to see is your budget and I can tell you what you care about. And that's the bottom line, unfortunately. But you can make a difference.
Yes. Well, Deb, thanks. It's always great to catch up with you and share, some conversation with you, learn from your wisdom. And it's been very thought provoking for me. I have matter of fact, I have an idea that you've sparked. We'll have to chat offline about that one.
I was going to say, let's continue the conversation.
Oh boy. There's But so anyway, if you're watching this episode on the Flourish DX YouTube page, please do like and subscribe and share with your friends. If you're watching or listening for the first time, welcome. I hope something that you hear will bring you back in the future. Previous episodes of the podcast can be found at psychhealthandsafetyusa.com. Please become a part of what we call the Psych Health and Safety USA movement by connecting to us on LinkedIn. This has been just a very enjoyable conversation, and looking forward to the next one, Deb, both with you and with my audience, with our next guest. So we'll see you, and hopefully you'll hear us next time on the next episode of the Psych Health and Safety USA podcast. Thanks very much. Tune in each Friday for new episodes of the Psych Health and Safety USA podcast. If you have a story or know of one that needs to be told, reach out to us on LinkedIn or send an email to david@id2-solutions.com or go to the Flourish DX website at flourishdx.com. We'll see you next time.